Hello, everyone. Thank you guys for being here today, and thank you all for being here on stage with me today. We have a really exciting conversation that we're going to kick off. For a little bit of context, my name is Alex York, and I run the Forbes 30 Under 30 list for the US and for Europe. So much of my job is about watching these cross-continental exchanges of funding, business building from the startup to later stage. So I'm super excited to talk to you guys today about how those sorts of things are impacting your, work, your day-to-day lives, and how you guys are watching companies grow. I want to start off by letting you guys all set the stage of why you are the right people to be having this conversation. So if you would be able to just give me kind of a quick rundown and give the audience a quick rundown of who you are and what you do today and why this is a conversation that is an important one for you to be having in this moment. Do you want to start, Emma?
Sure. Hi. Hi, everybody. I'm Emma Cloney. I'm based in Dublin. I'm the Senior Vice President for International Sales and Strategy and also GM of Ireland for a company called Core42. We're part of the G42 group, and my job is to basically bring sovereign AI infrastructure as a solution to Europe. The reason I think this is important is because AI is driving so much capital intensity in terms of capacity, and that's showing up in our day-to-day jobs in terms of the foundations that are required for AI to run at scale. And obviously within a European context on a sovereign basis as well. But the capital required to do that and drive that is top of mind for all of our customers today.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Manal. I'm a principal at VivaTech. For those who don't know us yet, HV is the largest VC fund coming out of Germany and essentially one of the largest pan-European funds investing multi-stage across topic sectors in all of Europe and the UK. Why is this relevant to sort of talk about this topic? I mean, to your point, I think there's a big question around capital deployed in Europe, right? Mainly around AI and deep tech, and how does Europe maintain its sovereignty and sort of its also geopolitical power, right, beyond tech in those sectors. And some of our portfolio companies that you might know, such as N8N, for example, are proof that there is a lot of talent in Europe, and we also need to have the capital to sort of follow it.
So, hello everybody, I'm Stephanie Hospital. I'm the founder and CEO of OneRagtime. So, OneRagtime is a VC fund and platform which invests mostly in French founders and companies in France and Europe. So, we are always the lead and lead seed investors, always at the board. So this topic matters a lot for us as we've done more than 50 investments since 2007. And when we look at who investment thesis, we back business that are accelerated by tech and AI, but we also back business that could develop the tools for AI companies. And when you see the capital intensity of AI, you have as an investor to pay attention very much to the equity story and who at the end of the day is going to help you to exit those companies. So, I mean, what is good for sovereignty sometimes is not good for your investment strategy. So this is why this topic matters a lot for me.
Hi, my name is Naofumi Makino. I'm a director of startup division at Jetro. Jetro is a Japanese government agency supporting Japanese startups go global. So we have around 2,000 startups from Japan in our portfolio, which are ready for going global. And our Japanese government is targeting more unicorns from Japan. So that's without capital from abroad, we cannot make it. So our main function is to connect Japanese startups with overseas capitals like you. And yeah, so that's why I'll be invited here.
Yes. So as you guys can see, these, amazing speakers are coming from across the globe and talking about unicorn investors, new startups across Europe. So much is happening, especially coming from the US. A lot of what we looked at for a long time was like all the money is in Silicon Valley. And even now across the US, that's changing. And of course, beyond the US as well. But I want to know, as people are talking about more of these hubs emerging and, money coming from elsewhere, is that actually happening? Because I think, of course, course, in the US, we talk about like maybe New York is a hub, yet the tech founders still move to SF before, they raise a ton of money. So I'd love to know from your work, is this actually happening? Is money coming from elsewhere, or where is most of the wealth still coming from today? Do you want to start now?
Yeah. So I can give some examples. Andreessen Horowitz is coming to set up the office in Japan. They have already secured some LPs investment from Japanese corporates. So that's one of the reasons. But they are looking at us investing in Japanese startups as well. So, and we are supporting them to find potential LP investments. And in Japanese ecosystem, there's a characteristics, right? Like we have more corporate investment than family office or investment from those financial sectors. So it's more stable to get investment as a LP from Japanese corporates. So that's why these Andreessen Forbes came to Japan. And also we have very good source in terms of startups and Japanese entrepreneurs. They have more and more global mindset and going global. So, yeah.
So I would add that it takes time to build an ecosystem, and we've been building the French tech ecosystem since 2010, 2012. I mean, it's a lot of support from the States, tax condition, talents. And obviously today, likewise in Europe, we see the effect of that. We have investors, international investors, who are coming to France, who are coming to Europe to back scale up. To be the investor tapping into those very niche startups that we think we can have in Europe. But when you look at the intensity of the capital overall, today the massive amount of money are still in the US, with a lot, clearly happening in terms of AI. So when you are European funders, I do think that you have to think hard where you start your company according to the type of company you're going to do. So at OneRagtime, we're proud to back a company named Antimatter, who is doing the first neo-cloud services for inference AI. And this company is very interesting because they built since day one in all the geographies. So they are in Europe, in Dubai, in France, in the US, but also in Hong Kong, which enables this company, day one, to be operating as a global players, and then to attract capital from everywhere. We've been backing, as for us, the only European backer, but then we have money coming from US, from Hong Kong, from Singapore. And this is what, so it means that if you want to build an AI company, you want to be exposed at some point to massive capital outflow, debt or equity. And to be attractive, you need to think hard how you start your company. If you're doing a fintech, no way. You can do it in Europe easily. But then you will be tackling the European market, because I do think that, unfortunately, most of our politicians are confusing sovereignty with it has to be bought at some point by a French player or European player. And this is the main risk we have today, educating our politicians that what is great for a state is to be open to capital flow, to be open to international funders, to be attractive for them, and at some point to build something that is truly needed by the others, as Israel has always been able to do. And this is the challenge that I guess we have in Europe, to make European sovereignty the fact that European tech is the best tech for everybody in the world.
Manal, what are you seeing? Are you seeing these new hubs really start up, or what's your experience been like with it?
Yes, absolutely. So maybe as a background, so I invest myself mainly in early stage investing, so sort of pre-seed to A founders, but as a fund, we do see everything up to Series D. So my take might be a bit biased on the early stage. We do see a lot of sort of outflux to SF, especially earlier and earlier, and founders that I would say are the more ambitious of the pack, right? So that's something that started as anecdotal evidence, but now we do see a strong sort of, everyone wants to go to SF. There's that sort of saying that 2 months in SF means 2 years in the rest of the world, right? And that says a lot about the sort of talent and capital concentration that you have there that just speeds everything up, right? I am deeply a European champion, and I believe that we have so much talent here and so much capital and so much goodness, right? Sort of bring together as well. But it might be sometimes hard to actually convince the founders to actually stay here. And of course, when the time is right, it does make sense, and we do push our founders to also move, right? Because, of course, maybe co-investing with US funds or being on the ground also opens up such a huge market and network for them, right? But to your point, I would actually strongly agree that it also depends on what type of companies and what type of business models that you're going for. For example, I think in Europe, we've seen a lot happening on the application layer. So if I really limit myself to AI, right? And that is something that I would say we're less afraid of backing, right? Because we see the GTM, we see the sort of money coming in, right, in the next 6 to 12 months. We've been, I guess, a bit late to the party when it comes to foundational models, and maybe have underestimated how much of the value actually accrues to the models, right? And that is something that I think we are definitely sort of course correcting. So, for example, HV, we co-led the AMI Labs round of which is a 1 billion pre-seed, right? Which shows that there is appetite in Europe to build foundational models and to sort of back the best entrepreneurs in that layer as well. But I would argue that we need more of those if we look at the IPO filings that we hear about every day from the Anthropic, OpenAIs, etc.
There are so many things that we're going to get into. First, I want to just touch on your experience, Emma, being, having a large part of your job be based in the UAE. What is that emerging hub like? How is that changing the conversation here?
I think it's really interesting, and I totally pick up on Stephanie's point about you need an ecosystem for founders to flourish, right? So I think when we think about Europe, we need to think about the right conditions to help those founders both start up but scale and then stay in Europe. And to do that, you need to provide all the right, ingredients that they need. They need capacity, they need capital, and then they need commitment. And I think we have a lot of that commitment and the talent, both from the European, government, the European Commission. But what I'm seeing in the UAE is really interesting. And the UAE, I think, is a great example for all of us in Europe as we think about AI adoption. So the UAE thought about AI in a very different way. They did not see AI as just another tech cycle. They saw this as a strategic, important foundation to drive economic growth. And what they did was they basically combined policy with commitment, with driving and building infrastructure and capacity. And they literally align that to a long-term vision. And when you bring all of those three things together, so you have the vision, the customers, deployment with the right compute capacity and capital, you can go really fast. And that's where AI has been really staggeringly successful in the UAE. If we look at the latest Microsoft report, the diffusion report for Q1, the UAE has the highest diffusion numbers globally of any nation around AI adoption. And that is really because of that commitment all the way down. And it's connected. It's not just a single company or a single fund. It's literally connected throughout the whole society. And I think when we think about capital and funds, the UAE is also a great builder and a provider of capital to Europe. There's a really good example of our sister company, MGX, where we partnered with BPI France. We partnered with Mistral and NVIDIA to build out what will be one of the largest AI campuses in Europe, so which will basically bring 3 gigabytes to Europe through all through France. So I think we should not think about the Gulf region or the UAE specifically just as a capital provider, but actually as a capacity builder. So a partner that we can bring and introduce into that European context. And there's some amazing learnings that we can also bring to bear as we really start to scale and deploy adoption, AI adoption at scale.
And we're definitely seeing, of course, more funding, backing European founders. There's a stat that the amount of like global enterprise VC-backed value is like up to 18% in Europe compared to like 0 to 1%, like 30 to 40 years ago. So that has changed pretty significantly. But you guys all kind of speak here to like there needs to be this community around it. There needs to be more than maybe just the cash that's put in. So what else will it take for Europe to continue to increase this number from 17 or 18 to more and more? And do we want it to? Should it? Do we want to focus on like European founders going elsewhere? Like, what is the ideal path here that you guys are trying to help set out? Stephanie, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so I'm also a vice president of France Digital. It's the leading French startup and VC association, and we're very much involved to the European agenda. So it makes a lot of sense to have a global market in Europe, which is not yet the case, and so all the development of the 28 scheme to enable companies to operate globally, at least in Europe, for European companies. It works well for fintech with the financial passport, but not yet for the rest. I mean, if you start a company in France, you have to have subsidiaries with some complex label in the other countries. So that's is a lot. And then we need also to have a large corporation. We have a lot of big companies in Europe. They're all here. I mean, from all over the world, to start thinking how they can buy and they can help those companies to scale. And last but not least, it's important to fund companies, but what matters more is to have really funders who wants to become global leaders. We have the ability to scale at the international level the companies, and this is a specific set of skills that we're learning today. We have more and more that, but again, we need to think that success is global, and sometimes we think too much by region. Obviously, the political constraint that we have in the world make us be more by region, but at the end of the day, the success will be only global. And we see that with the US players. In the other hand, we need also to make sure that we develop sovereignty, thinking about resilience, making sure that we can be independent of our solution, but also having the solution, again, that the others needs.
When you're talking about then like these different things that come into building a global company, of course, it is, you know, being able to work with people from around the world, getting money from around the world, but also for certain industries, as both of you guys were mentioning, like the rules are different and how you have to build companies and what customers even want. Those are very different. So how would you guys advise, and anyone, but, you know, I know you, Manal and Stephanie, you guys mentioned this, how would you advise early stage founders to think about, I'm so early on in my founding journey, but I know I want this to be global. How do I like grow without growing too fast, or, you know, dilute where my brain power is going when you're trying to capture all these markets at once? How should a founder start in those early days to kind of set the groundwork for that?
I think I would say that would very much depend on the founder and sort of the actual topic that we're looking into, right? Maybe one of the sort of recent memory I have of a discussion I actually had with a founder building in the sort of AI legal space, so an AI native company for consumer legal services. And what we came about with was actually thinking through GTM together in a way that, okay, if you start in the UK, then the natural next market would be the US, just because legally speaking, the type of law that he's actually going after is structured in a very, very similar way. So you also need to make your life a little bit easier wherever you can, right? Because you are, you know, like everything that could go wrong will go wrong probably, you know, in early stage, and you need to minimize those risks essentially. So for that question, that's how I would sort of go about it. You do have natural fragmentation in Europe, which is a bit of a shame, right? But we saw quite clearly that if he was to go European country by European country, that would just slow him down versus competition, right? Versus much larger, well-funded competition from the US that could actually just come in, hire, you know, firepower of GTM, and then just sort of win Europe. So that kind of depends on what you build. But maybe another point that is indirectly sort of adjacent to your question, I think something else that Europe might need that is also more global and that will make these types of funders also global from the get-go is also to actually focus on compute, I think. So Europe will have an issue in terms of just not enough compute, right? To just power the models, power the actual intelligence, right? That we need to actually create that sort of new economy, right? Or that layer. And there's that paper that I was just reading the other day, Europe 2031 by Judith Dada and some MIT professors. That's really interesting and shows the sort of hopeful, but also doom and gloom trajectory of Europe, right? And I think one key learning for me was that there's about 5% of compute that is available in Europe versus 80% in the US. So this is quite staggering when you think about it.
What else might Europe offer, though? Because I know, Stephanie, in preparation for this panel, you talked a lot about the infrastructure, the energy access, all the sorts of things that exist within Europe that in the US, at least I know we're talking a lot about, like, where are we going to get this from? To your point, Manal, about like this compute power, what else does Europe offer that, you know, a founder, maybe if it's not purely cash, can gain from the partnerships, the deals, all those sorts of things that they're getting here on the ground?
Infrastructure matters a lot. As you said, compute matters a lot. And this is why, as far as OneRagtime, we are backing a compute companies. I mean, because we need that infrastructure and we need to do it in a very flexible way. And this is what we do with Antimatter, where we can offer access to compute wherever there's energy. And the good thing is that we have a lot of energy, nuclear energy, renewable energy available in Europe. I mean, if you compare to China, I mean, clearly China is ahead, but compared to the US, I mean, we're pretty king of the world for that. So we can say, yeah, I mean, we've been able to develop that. We have infrastructure, network infrastructure, I mean, capabilities, and we often forget that. But if we want to offer all those services, you have to have good network. I mean, and the telecom industry in Europe is really strong, and we have always invested in that. So I guess that this is a very strong advantage. Talents, obviously. But what matters more is will. The will to be the one winning. And often you will learn, and you have maybe this case in Japan, hear people saying, it's too late. No, it's never too late. Because every 10 years, we have a new technological revolution that makes everything possible. So let's take it. Let's be prepared for this one, but also for the next one. And make sure all your current business are adapted to this wave of AI. And this is a massive opportunity for Europe. I mean, we can get productivity, efficiency, and we have all the components at the end of the day to offer that attractive place for funders. I mean, as for me, I prefer to start my company in France. I mean, the quality of life, quality of infrastructure, quality of everything matters a lot. And this is also the values that we are offering in Europe. So this is why we have to all to fight to keep that. Because again, every new election, every new government may change that. And we've been fortunate in France to have 10 years of a great support from the government. So let's make it happen again.
Yeah, in the US, there's a lot of the 996 rule, working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. So if that doesn't exist in France, I think that's a good option for many reasons. Now, I want to ask you, we haven't talked so much about the Asian market yet in this conversation. How is Japan coming into play? How is the conversation different there versus Europe? And how are these kind of international flows happening from your perspective?
I think for early stage startups from Japan, previously we have, as I mentioned, we supported more than 2,000 startups from Japan, and previously we supported more later stage. They have a product market fit in Japanese market, and then they go to the US market or other market. But they couldn't have a founder commitment. They just hire a sales manager, and then they failed actually. So now we have supported more and more early stage startups going global from day one, and we support them to setting up their C Corp and getting visa in the US. So that's what we are doing right now. But on the other side, we have advantage in domain knowledge, like entertainment, content industry, or manufacturing industry. So in those domains, we can have advantage to make a startups from Japan, I think.
And for those startups then that you're kind of helping to support there, do they normally then stay in Japan for the entirety of the career? Is there that global like expansion of I'm going to build an HQ elsewhere, or what's like the later stage after you help to support them through that?
Actually, more and more Japanese entrepreneurs move into the Bay Area, and then they start their startups there, and we are expecting them to go there, and then after exiting their startups, they may invest in Japanese startups. So that's what we are expecting. It's kind of ecosystem, right? So we have several examples, Japanese entrepreneurs. Like one example is one Japanese Y Combinator alumni. They got exit from $100 million USD, and now they have a fund for the US and Japanese startups to invest in. So that's a very good example. So.
Maybe I will recall a personal memory when a few years ago I was invited with Jerry Yang, former CEO of Yahoo, and Nobuyuki Hidei to give a lecture to Japanese founders, explaining them how you can scale and start an ecosystem. It was in 2019. And Japan has been always paving the way for technology breakthrough. I mean, when Nobuyuki Hidei-san was the CEO of Sony, under his management, you launch the PlayStation, you launch the Walkman. I mean, clearly, and again, what happened, I guess, in Japan, it's a question of will, political will, social will. I mean, you have to have role model, people that are the entrepreneurs you want to empower to explain to young people that yes, it's possible, because it was possible before and it's still possible. It takes time, but I'm sure you will make it, because now, on top of that, you will have a lot of money flow. I've heard that the institutional investors in Japan has been massively exposed to SpaceX. So you have the money. You have the money to scale that. You need to have the will.
Yeah, that's why we are supporting Japanese entrepreneurs to change their mindset with our. We have lots of acceleration program with global partners like 500 Global and Alchemist and other well-known accelerator in the US. And now the Japanese entrepreneurs' mindset, it's changing. And that's why they go to the Bay Area to start their business, I think. So.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I want to talk about the UAE side of things. And we mentioned here, like the French government being super supportive, kind of the Japanese model there. You talked about that while the UAE has like tons of governmental support and there's a lot that's happening there, that doesn't necessarily need to be the model that others follow. But I'd love to know like what we can learn from it, what might be helpful to replicate in a place like Europe or globally, and maybe the things that you think should stay European or should stay kind of their own course.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. So we're not saying by any means that we should follow or copy the UAE model, because Europe is very complex. You know, I think you said already, Europe is fragmented. That makes it beautiful and it makes it complex at the same time, right? So we have all of those lovely nuances, but we have very strong regulation in Europe, not just at the European level, at the country level, at the industry level, at the company level. So, you know, that adds another layer of complexity. So whatever we do and what companies will decide to do around sovereign AI has to be what we're coining sovereign on their terms. So what does sovereignty mean to a French, public sector institution versus a German bank is completely different. So I think the notion of sovereignty is very nuanced, and I think we need to recognize that. So, you know, we hope that what has been built in the UAE, I think first of all, it's at a national scale. And that makes it very different. There are very few countries that have rolled out and deployed AI at scale nationally. So if we think about the infrastructure and the backbone that Core42 and G42, our parent company, have built in the UAE, it's across all of government with, for example, 11 million digital transactions per day. We've built the first global financial services sovereign cloud with the Central Bank of the UAE. And we've also built a fully sovereign public cloud where we've got almost 100 customers running, and that's got 200 sovereign controls actually built into the architecture. And I think one of the learnings there is we've built sovereign from the ground up. We haven't bolted sovereignty on to infrastructure and operations after the fact. And I think that's a big learning that maybe Europe can take. And then I think the other thing is that this level of, yes, capital, but also capacity, compute capacity, and also commitment. You know, and you talked about it, will, commitment. That's really important. And there is great regulation now in Europe. You know, the recent tech sovereignty package is putting all of the technology investment, AI, top of the agenda for the European Commission and countries that fall in within that. So there is commitment, there is funding. What I think we now need to do is build and encourage sovereign solutions that make sense for Europe. And I do genuinely think that we can't do it on our own in Europe. You know, I think it's a hybrid approach is probably the most sensible approach, because most European companies, and we know that about 62% of European companies right now are in the business of and finding and identifying an AI sovereign provider. So they are building an AI sovereign solution for their organization. And they want access to global providers. They want access to the best in class, but they want to do it on their terms. So they want to retain control. They want to make sure that they have the, not just data residency, because we can have loads of data centers, but it doesn't mean it's sovereign just because they sit in a country. I think sovereignty has moved way beyond with AI than just data residency and failover and latency, which we had in the cloud era. It's now really who has control to my data, who's got access, how is that accessed? Agents, how do we bring agentic control into all of that? So there's a lot of learnings and the proof points of the commitment, and as I say, that rollout at scale over many years, and then that actually showing up in the actual AI adoption across the entire country. But it's not a blueprint. It's ideas. It's a proof point, but it's not a blueprint. So I think we're very open to having conversations and working through an ecosystem of partners, because actually AI, I think, genuinely only does work through partnerships and local partnerships. So our message is really, let's take what we've learned and then work through local partners with local companies to build the sovereign environment that they need on their terms.
You're so right, though, that as things become more and more global, more and more like tech driven, it's super hard to then distinguish like whose is whose information or data or rights to things. And I think, and we mentioned this on the PEP call as well, like there is kind of this dichotomy in a lot of founders' minds right now of, do I want to have the freedom to build this how I want, or do I want to get global money? How do you advise, and all of you, I asked this question to, how do you advise them to think about that right now, as more and more money maybe is available around the world, but maybe they'll have to start thinking about, am I going to have to change the way that I'm doing business in exchange for some of this?
I think you want to go? Okay. I think again, maybe the devil is in the details, and I would very much have that sort of case-by-case conversation actually with founders. To be honest, there is truth to sort of having external money or international money, and obviously smart money will help you in your cap table, right? In terms of introductions, opening markets, opening the right talent, attracting, and also it is a signaling game for a long time, right? Until you're very, very established. So in that sense, I would default towards, do have all the conversations. When you run a process, do run a large process, do take the introductions. I think I see also some of my founders being sort of quite particular. And also if you do have a lot of interest, you try and sort of block the doors. I usually advise them sort of open the doors actually and speak to as many people as possible, because you actually never really know what will come out of a conversation, right? Beyond just money. And in general, we do live on the one hand, in a more and more globalized world. So I would think that it makes sense, right? Again, caveat, it very much depends on what you build, I think. And maybe one side note or something I wanted to add to sort of what you're saying, I very much agree to your points. And I think one concrete example is that we've all seen that Anthropic has blocked Fable, right? Mythos usage to anyone who's non-US. So to the point of forcing sort of non-US founders to also build Anthropics.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you say, Manal. I do think that as a founder, you need to think global day one, but be clear on depending on which type of company you're doing, which equity, fundraising, customer story you will have. If you're building an AI company, again, be careful, because at some point there might be restriction. At the end of the day, you want to exit. Who is going to be able to buy your company because you are a very important company for your states? So you have to pay attention to where you structure, how you structured, which investor you take, but be global. If you don't think global, if tech is not global, because again, all our politicians are chanting us to think locally. It's the rise of populism is about being local. And we are all citizens of the world. We need to keep that. And we welcome again all the founders in France, in Europe, international founders. And I guess that an ecosystem that is successful is an ecosystem that is able to attract international founder creating their company in Europe instead of the US or Japan or French founders in Japan. This is how you see that your ecosystem is attractive for entrepreneurs, but also for then financial investors.
There has been obviously a huge focus on some of these US AI companies, to your point, raising, billions of dollars, taking up a massive share of the funding and then also of the consumer base. First, I want to ask you now, how are you thinking about the US companies, especially, he mentioned to me in the green room that you're headed to SF shortly to start, working there. How are you thinking about how these US players are really leading the charge in some ways? And how do you advise other startups to either build on that, do something differently? Like, what does that mean for the other AI companies around the world hoping to raise money today? And I'll ask this to everyone now. I'd love to know your thoughts since you're headed there shortly to be right down the street from them.
Market, you mean? Yes, again, as I mentioned, we have some advantage in domain some manufacturing. I can give you some example. We got international founders which became unicorn from Japan recently, which is called Genki Robotics, which was established by Andy Rubin, who is the founder of Android. And he came to Tokyo to set up his robotics startups in Japan. And one of the reasons why he came to Japan is I think we have a very good manufacturing industries, and also we have domain data. So that's why we can attract those international founders to Japan. But still, without global funding, especially from the US, we cannot make such unique, because this Genki Robotics as well, they got funding from NEA or top-tier VCs from the US. So I think business is in Japan, but funding from global.
Totally.
If I may say, at OneRagtime, we have always seen our founders changing dimension the day they were operating in the US. So if you are very ambitious, start in France, start in Europe, but at some point, if your company is an AI company, not a fintech or marketplaces, even that, you have to be successful in the US. You have to be exposed to the US. You have to think international. So, and as for us, we're trying also to back founders that are not originating from France and that goes to the US, start a company there, because this is also where, when you look at all the success story in the US, you have many French founders that are top performer that have built massive company in the US. So this is also a way of building your ecosystem, backing your French founder all over the world, or Japanese founders.
Manal, you have mentioned too that some of the precedents set by U.S. companies in terms of how much they're raising, might be skewing things. We have to think about it in context. So, there have been a couple, unicorn companies in Europe that have raised, $1 billion plus, but that's, for a lot of the AI companies in the U.S., just another day. How are you thinking about, as you're on the ground with founders today, how are these precedents that the US AI companies are setting, how is that impacting your conversations and your advice for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I would very much echo what you're saying, actually, Stephanie. So there is something about the ambition of founders when they go to the US and when they drink a bit of that SF Kool-Aid, to be honest, and just seeing that sky truly is the limit, and that you can build so much more, so much faster, so much bigger, and have access to so much talent, right? So that is something that when the time is right, but now the time becomes faster and faster, actually, we do push our founders to start a GTM, in the US, or say yes to customers that are just beyond the sort of normal playbook, right? And just, go faster, break things, let's see what happens. But I think also being, especially in AI, right, being close to the power, so to say, or being close to really the pulse of what is happening becomes more and more important, and the gap does widen. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. We have just under a minute left. I'd love to go down line and just ask you all for one prediction that you have about how money flow is going to change within the next 5 to 10 years that might really impact a lot of the people in this room. Do you want to start it off?
Well, I think we should stop thinking about capital as just money. I think we should really start thinking about, as I said, the UAE example of capital being the opportunity to open doors, form partnerships, and be open to not being, the money is coming from the EU or from the Gulf region, but actually in partnership together, I think we can achieve an awful lot more.
Maybe one quick word is that there's so much talent here. I think talent is equally distributed. We might need more capital in Europe, in a sense, in the later stages as well. And that's something that I'm very, very hopeful will happen.
Well, money is power, so make sure that the European capital is backing European funders and thinking that it's more attractive to invest here in Europe than to back the US companies.
I think now we are moving to agentic AI era. So now it's, I think, more important than ever, the domain knowledge. So each country should have their advantage in terms of industry. So Japan has some advantage in some industry, and France has some advantage in some areas. So yeah, you can go to that kind of domain knowledge. You should have some advantage, definitely.
And that knowledge is part of that capital that you were mentioning too, Emma. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you guys for listening in. I appreciate you guys taking the time.